Welcome back to the Skills Builder series with FP20 Analytics. I'm your host, Tony Hewlett, and thank you for joining us today. In our previous video, we transformed the marketing analysis campaign dataset from Challenge 20 from a flat file into a streamlined star schema data model. This setup helped you organize your facts and dimension tables into a clear structure, making it easier and faster to slice and dice and analyze your data. Today, we're going to build off of our work from our last session and explore advanced Power Query and DAX techniques to group, bin, and sort our data in innovative ways to uncover hidden insights. And if you missed the first video, not to worry, you can download the PBIX file from the FP20 Analytics website using the link below. Let's jump in and get started and walk through the project brief together. In our previous installment of the Skills Builder series, we created a data model from our company's email campaign data. Now we're going to expand on that by leveraging Power Query and DAX for advanced data exploration, binning, and potentially sorting. So what we're going to do for our criteria is prepare and enhance the existing data model. And again, don't worry if you don't have that, it'll be available for you to download. And these strategies will support more insightful visualizations and scalable reporting. So our deliverables are as such. We're going to explore the data and use some functions in Power Query like table.schema and table.profile. We're going to create customer journey groups. We're also going to look at creating a group for region or continent. And then finally, we're going to look at some data cleaning and potentially some final validation to see what this all looks like once we start to bring it into a matrix or a bar chart. Okay, so deliverable 1. This deliverable is to use Power Query to thoroughly examine the data structure by leveraging table.schema to validate our column names and data types. Additionally, we're going to profile the data with table.profile to identify potential issues such as missing values or outliers and inform any binning and transformation strategies that we may use. So let's take a look at this in Power BI. Okay, so I've opened up the previous data model we worked on before, and I'm going to open up transform data. Pull that over so that you can see what's going on. So you can see here that we have our fact table, our dimension tables, and then there's another kind of table that's hanging out there at the bottom called profile. And what we're going to do is we're going to delve into exactly what that step identifies. Now, we are doing this after we've built our data model, and that is totally fine. You can do this step at the beginning before you kind of transformed and made your facts and dimensions or after. It honestly doesn't matter. What this does is it allows you to explore your data and potentially provide insights that you might not have already had. Okay, so how we're going to do this first step is we're going to click on the new source and we're going to go to blank query. And once that opens up, in here, this is where we're going to use a couple of those functions that we mentioned previously, like table.profile or table.schema. And then we're going to take a look and see what exactly that step does. So the first function that we're going to call is table.schema. And what this is going to allow us to do is identify the structure of our data. So in here, we're going to put table, and you can see as you start to type it out, the IntelliSense actually kind of helps you along the way. Schema, and then if we select yes, now we need to identify what table in our model here that we want to take a look at. Like if we started with our flat file, that would be the only one that's available to us. But we do have options here because we've created our facts and dimensions. So for the purposes of this video, I'm just going to pick our fact table. So in here, you're going to reference the fact table. And again, it just starts to pop up, which makes your job a lot easier. And then once that's done, we're going to select the checkbox. Oh, and then you can see I've made an error because I did use IntelliSense. Totally fine. And now we'll do it again and click go. It's taking a look at our fact table for us. So date sent, clicked, bounced, these are all attributes that exist in our fact table. And as you move along the way, it's letting you know the position of it in our table. That's the schema part of it. So date sent is going to be 0 as for the indexing part of it, all the way to 10. It gives you the type. So for date, we have date.type, and then for everything else, we have integer. If we keep scrolling along, like there's a whole bunch of information that you can have here. So that's kind of what it allows you to take a look at. And this is really great if you do need to have kind of an understanding of the structure of your data. And this becomes more important, I would say, as you start to get into your larger models. Okay. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I am just going to rename this. I do like to rename our steps just so that we know, like above, I do have profile because I was just testing it out previously. And so here I'm just going to do schema. And we can leave this in our model, but we don't want to load this when we hit close and apply. So to ensure that you don't load it and see it when you're working in your Power BI report, you can just hit enable load. And there you go. So we have it here. We can look at it. We can reference this if we need to, but it's not going to load into the main model once we hit close and apply. The next function is the table.profile. So we're going to go through the same steps together. So we come up to new source and we go to blank query, put in table.profile. And there you can see it's populated in our list. And this time I'm going to make sure that I get rid of that additional table. And then again, we need to reference whichever table in our model that we want to take a look at. And I still want to take a look at the fact table. I think that's got some interesting information and I want to delve a little bit deeper into that. So there we go. And then we hit that check mark again. And it shouldn't take too long. Awesome. So here you go. So the result of this is we have, again, it identifies which column that we are looking at and investigating. And then across the top here, we have min, max, average, standard deviation, the distinct count of each one, and the null count. So this is a great way, again, to identify, especially when you have larger kind of fact tables, or if you're doing anything that has to do with checks and balances. This is a fantastic function that you can use when you're exploring your data. So if I was to rename this to be a profile, and then profile already exists. So let's do that again. And I'll just hit rename and we'll do profile _1. And again, we don't want to include this in our model. So we're just going to hit uncheck enable load. And I'm going to do the same thing for this one. This was just the one that I was making earlier. And that's fine. The reason that message popped up for me was because I had already loaded it inadvertently into the model and I didn't want to. So it's just letting me know that now it's going to be gone from that. Okay, so that ends our deliverable 1, which was identifying and exploring our data model and the data that's within there. Welcome to deliverable 2. In this objective, we're going to pop into Power Query to create a custom column which categorizes customer interactions based on their conversion targets, such as pre-sales, sales, and retaining customers. Alternatively, we're going to create this group as well when we go into the report layer by using something called groups. Let's pop into Power BI. Okay, so now we're going to walk through how to create a custom column in Power Query. Now there's a lot of different options that we have here in order to make this step kind of possible. So what we're going to do is let's go to the top here where it says add column. And you can see that we have the options for creating a column from examples, a custom column, you can even invoke a function, or a conditional column. Now in this case, we are taking something from the attributes from the conversion column and creating kind of a new group based on those. So the one that kind of makes the most sense and I think is the easiest to work with is the conditional column. So we're going to select conditional column from up here and we're going to change the name of our column to be customer journey. Now we know that we want to use the conversion target. Now it defaults to the operator of being equals, which is fine. That's actually what we want as part of our logic. But if you click on the caret, you can see that it does provide other options for you. So does not equal, begins with, etc. And this can just depend on the logic that you need to apply in order to make this new kind of conditional or custom column. So in this case, in our value category, we're going to put in download. And then we want our output to be pre-sales. And now that we're done that, we want to continue on this. So we're going to add a clause, our conversion target. We're going to keep the default as equals. And then in this case, we're going to select sign up, and it's going to be also pre-sales because we've got our new people and they're part of our pre-sales category. So our last one here that we're going to put into like this portion is going to be purchase. So again, we're going to keep that as equal. And in this one, we're just going to say that this everything that's a purchase is going to go in our sales category. Now, we do have two left for form completion and web visit, but because we have an else clause down here, we can just put everything else in our retaining customers column. So that's what we're going to put in there. And then once we hit OK, you're going to see the output of this. So we have pre-sales and pre-sales for sign up and download. And then we have form completion and web visit as our retaining customers. And of course, we just have that purchase to sales. So that's perfect. So now what we're going to do is we're going to rename this to be customer journey. And then that way you just can see as part of your step progression. So now that we're done that, we're going to hit close and apply, and we're going to see how we can create that same type of customization and grouping by using a different functionality. So now we're hitting close and apply. And once that's completed, you're going to find it in our conversion table here on the right. We called it customer journey. Now we're going to use this feature called groups. I've already kind of created one ahead of time. So I'm just going to delete this one for now. And then we're going to redo it. We don't want to see the work that's already been done. We're going to highlight, conversion target. And then we're going to click on the three ellipses and select new group. And what's going to happen is it's going to open up a new window. And right away, it just kind of creates this name for you. We're going to create the same name called customer journey, but we're going to keep that groups at the end so that we know that it's the two different versions that we've created here. So customer journey, and then we have groups. Now, what's really unique about this one, it offers a little bit more flexibility kind of on the fly, but it can also create a little bit more work depending. So in this case, we only have 5 values to choose from. This might not be a fantastic kind of solution if you have a lot of categories in your group by. In Power Query becomes definitely more powerful and easier for you in the long run. But in this case, we've only got these 5 that we want to group. So all you need to do is select, and we'll start with purchase because it's all kind of by itself, and you select group. Now, what it does is it pushes it over kind of to here, and it creates a title for you just based off of the attribute name itself. But you can double click into here and change that to be, in our case, sales. So now we want to come back over here, and we're going to create those other 2 groups. So we have download, and then I'm going to hit Control left click to select 2 at the same time. So now I have download and sign up. And then I'm going to click on group, and you can see it's created a concatenated name just of those 2 kind of attributes. So I'm going to come into here, and we're going to change this to pre-sales. And then our last one, we're going to create the same thing. We're going to hit Control click to create those 2 groups and rename this to returning customers. Now, the last thing I like to do when I'm creating groups in this way is to ensure that I select this include other group. What this is going to do is, let's say, for example, your dimension changes and attributes are added that you haven't accounted for by doing this pre-selection. It's going to ensure that they get bucketed into another category. Then you can come back in here, edit your group, and maybe change that to give it its own name. but it makes sure that it gets put somewhere and isn't just kind of sitting in the ether. So now I'm going to select OK. And we're just going to take a look at these two groups side by side, right? So we're going to create a table view. I'm going to put in customer journey. This is the one that we made in Power Query. And I'm just going to add in total clicked. Now you do see that there are some blanks coming through, which is to be potentially expected depending on how clean your data is. So that's something that you could investigate further to understand maybe why you have 235 sitting in blank. And then we're going to just duplicate this table here, and we're going to swap out that customer journey with this customer journey. So I'll put it there. Now you should see that they are exactly the same. So we have our blanks there, 235, 1,074, etc. So this kind of concludes two different ways that you can create a grouping using Power Query, and in this case we used conditional column, as well as groups. Now, in our next deliverable, we're going to take a look at another way by using DAX to create groupings or binning as well. So congratulations on finishing deliverable 2. All right, welcome to deliverable 3. In this deliverable, we're going to classify our country data into meaningful regional groups such as North America, Europe, Asia, etc. We're going to look at using ChatGPT to help us identify quickly some of those regions so that we don't have to do any of that kind of background work in order to create those groupings. So this will help save time and ensure consistency, especially when we're working with an extensive list. So let's head over to Power BI and get started. In deliverable 3, we're going to take a look at creating another calculated group. But this time, we're going to look at creating this in DAX. Now, using something like country can be quite an exhaustive list of attributes. So using something like that group that we showed you in the last one might take a little bit more time. Completely feasible and doable. But in this case, we're going to use a tool that I would say most developers are working with hand in hand in this day and age, which is working with ChatGPT, and how we can use that to create these groups without too much effort and work on the part of the developer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop over into the table view, and we're going to look at our country dimension. Now you are going to see that I've already got a region created, which I was just testing. And then we have it here in case something kind of goes awry, and then we have something to fall back on. But essentially what we're going to look at is this country category. So we've got this country here, and all of our countries are available that are in this data set. Now this is something to be mindful as well. So if your dimensions update and you don't have it specified because it is hard-coded, you have to make sure that you have logic that accounts for anything that might kind of come in afterwards. So an other bucket or something to that effect. So what I like to do is I'm going to start with this. And there's a couple of different ways that you can kind of copy the data from here. So if you right-click and you hit copy, you can see that you have the option for column or table. Now in this case, I only want this column. So I'm going to select column, and it's going to be stored in my clipboard now. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go open up ChatGPT. Now, if you have any type of other software that you use for this type of thing, maybe even Copilot, feel free to use whatever available to you. I have ChatGPT, so that's what I'm going to show. So I'm going to open up my browser window where that exists. And the biggest part of this when you're working with a natural language query is to ensure that you have your prompts specific. So when you're working through adding information, chatting with them and asking if it needs any clarification can also be important. But I do have kind of a prompt that I used already, and then we can kind of work with it to ensure we get the groupings that we want, because sometimes it might infer something that doesn't make sense to what you require. Now I'm going to start off with a prompt that says, hi, be friendly, always say please and thank you. I'm just going to say I have a column of names from my data, column of country names from my data, and I need to assign each country to a corresponding region or continent. Okay, so you can give examples too. So in this case, we can say North America, Europe, Asia, etc. And that might just also help kind of guide towards what you want your end result to be. So we just want to ask if, can you help generate a list? And what else do we want it to do? We also want to help us create that calculated column, right? And create the DAX code. Oops, is that right? Code to create a calculated column. So I'm going to provide the list below that we copied and pasted, and let's just see what it comes up with. Now, I am using the most available and free version of this, but if you do have a paid subscription, you can look at, changing which kind of engine that you're using. So let's take a look at what the calculated column it's generated. Now, typically I just kind of take a peek first to see if it makes sense. So right now it's grouping United States, Canada, Mexico, and Puerto Rico in North America. I took a quick scan of South America, and then we have Asia, we have Europe, and then we have Africa, and then Oceania. So I'm obviously not going to do a deep dive of this. I think it's easier to kind of use this and see it once you kind of copy and paste it and put it into Power BI. But I'm fairly happy off the cuff that this looks pretty good to me. So I'm going to hit copy at the top, and then we're going to head back over into Power BI, and we're going to create a calculated column. So I already have one called region. So in this case, I'm just going to call this region 2. So the other thing that I could have done to kind of make this step a little bit easier for me when I copied and pasted it over is I could have just said, hey, my dimension where my country column lives is dim_country. Now we can update this here, easy peasy. If you highlight this and hit Control-Shift-L, it highlights all of the table names that you want to replace. And then you can just hit, there's a couple different ways you can do this, but if you just hit back and then start to type in dim_country, sometimes it shows up. In this case, it didn't. That's okay. It's not angry at me, so I'm going to say that it's going to work. And then we'll hit OK. Awesome. So it does look like my region 2 has been created. So interestingly, I see some differences right off the bat for potentially names that were excluded. So Cuba was missed. Interesting. So there are some blanks. So there's a couple of different ways that you can fix that. So normally I would probably go back and forth and be like, hey, you missed it. But what we could also do is open this up and then just add Cuba. But really this is just to show you how you can work with ChatGPT to create that instead of having to kind of manually do that process for yourself, right? So I'm just going to use the first region because I did actually have to do back and forth when I was creating this region with ChatGPT the first time. But for the first one, I'm actually super impressed that we kind of got that. Now, if we click back into country, and of course, there are other ways to do this. You could also load in a country table, like something, go to an outside resource, grab something that has a country, region, latitude, merge it in Power Query. You could do a bunch of different things, but this is really kind of that quick way to create that hierarchy that we're looking for. So the other thing that you could look to do, like we did in the previous step, is select new group. And then you could do that kind of manual clicking and then grouping. But you can imagine that there's a lot of returns here. So that is a pretty tedious effort and would probably take a lot of time. So maybe not something that you want to do. So now that we've got this region kind of established, what we can do is let's say, for example, we want to bring this into our model, let's say as a bar chart, right? So I'm going to start with my region first, and then I'm going to put country underneath because I want to be able to drill into that. And then I'm going to use my total clicked bin, and I want to go up. There we go. So what's really nice about this is now we've got everything kind of in those region buckets, and we can either drill down to the next level of the hierarchy if we wanted to, or we can turn on click to drill down and click into those different regions to really get that information that we're looking for. And then if we want to sort it, we can look at choosing the 3 ellipses at the top here, and what do we want to sort it by? So in this case, we can do it alphabetically by region. We could also change that and do it by total click if we wanted to see what is our high point and what is our low point. It really is kind of up to you at the end of the day and or your stakeholder of what they're looking for. So that was another way to create a conditional calculated column and add to our data model to help in our analysis of this report. All right, welcome to deliverable 4. Congratulations on making it this far. In this deliverable, we're going to replace hard-coded zeros with nulls in Power Query for cleaner visualizations and fewer misleading blanks. We'll validate any bins or groups that we have created in Power BI to ensure that our visuals are accurate and usable. So let's pop into Power BI and get started. Okay, so in this deliverable, we're going to take a look at our data and see if there's any spots that we can clean because the data looks a little bit messy. So if I look at my total clicked by region and I start to drill into country, now if I drill down into Asia, you can see that I do have some countries that show blank. Now, we might not necessarily want these to display as a 0 on our charts. Now, if your data has hard-coded value of 0 coming through, then it is going to show up on a chart as 0. So if we go to show as a table, you can see that Asia, Afghanistan is coming in as 0. And that might be true, but in this case, a null would work just as well as a 0. So what we're going to do is we're going to go up and back into Power Query and take a look at that column and see how we could maybe change those zeros to null values so that our visualizations are a lot cleaner here. So I'm going to open up Transform Data. There are a lot of instances here where you can see click, bounce, and open. They do have zeros across the board. So what we're going to do is we're going to fix that. So if I click into a 0 here, and I right click and we go to replace values. This is a quick way for us to say, okay, you're going to look for zeros and you're going to replace with null. And that's all you need to put in there. And we select OK. And now it's going to make that change for you. And now you can see it's coming through as null. Since we're only working with total clicked, I'm just going to select close and apply. And then we're going to see what happens to our visual once this change gets converted over. All right, so it's done. And you can see now we don't have any of those additional kind of countries that were coming up with those zeros. And that really makes it all nice and clean. So the next thing that we're going to do as part of our data validation is just make sure that our other bins that we created still are all working good. So let's bring in customer journey. And in this time, I'm still going to use my clicks. And let's just create a bar chart really quickly. So we do have those blanks coming through. So let's take a look at that. If we go into transform data, so we do have some nulls that are coming through. So as long as that makes sense. So it's one of those things where not every value might have been assigned something, but we just wanted to make sure when we were doing our previous kind of merges and joins that we didn't miss a step. So it does look like there are some nulls that are coming through. And again, this is something where you could reference the original file to just ensure that everything that we did previously was making sense. But in this case, it's null. It doesn't have a conversion type assigned to it. And that might just be the case, right? So I'm just going to hit back and close and apply. So those were our buckets there. And again, if we wanted to sort our data, we can choose the sort that's here by alphabetical. And in this case, you can do that quite easily, or you could do it by total clicks. And that's how you can kind of change the sorting there. And then we just want to take a look at our last one here, which was the one that we made with our groups, and just see what that looks like. And there we go, pre-sales, returning customer blank. And then you can really start to work and play with your data and figure out how at the end of the day we're going to visualize that. And I think as part of our next series, we're going to take a look at pulling all these pieces together and really creating kind of data-driven story that we can present to our stakeholders. Thank you very much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed this and can't wait to see you the next time. Well, that's a wrap of our second Skills Builder series. Thank you everyone for joining us today. We covered a lot of data exploration techniques in Power Query. We also looked at using something like ChatGPT to create a calculated column. And we also looked at removing any zeros and replacing those with null to allow our data to be more useful in our visuals. If you enjoyed this, please hit the like and subscribe button, and we look forward to seeing you again in our next video. Thank you very much and have a great day.